Hi, it's me, Ingrid INFP, and this is driving lessons for the ADHD life, where I go through this book um, called Driving Lessons for Daily Life for You with ADHD. And we're going to be going through the theory of ADHD in this second chapter. It's mostly about the negatives, the problems of ADHD. So ADHD does give a lot of positives, but it also gives a lot of negatives. But this is the first page of this has some art as usual. And like real driving, you need to do the theory first. So this is how to use our strengths in order to, manage our weaknesses. So what is ADHD is, they talk about how the three corners of ADHD is impulse control, overactivity, and deficiency in concentration and being distracted. It's attention deficits. That's what ADHD stands for. So they've done a lot of research about this, and the fact is that it has to cause dysfunction in your life in order for it to be a diagnosis. But most people with ADHD also have other diagnoses, so that makes things a little bit complicated. So certain things that you can have difficulties with is managing your economy, your finances, like finding papers in your house, feeling restless, feeling like you're going in driven by a motor. It's difficult to get things done and to finish different tasks that you need to do. And there's always stuff that's getting into the way from you actually achieving stuff. And you keep forgetting what you were supposed to be doing. So they say that ADHD doesn't have to do with laziness or low intelligence. It's just difficult to do effective work. So how common it is, according to this book, which is not that old, it's 3% of Sweden's population. And it does say that some children with ADHD can not have ADHD when they're adults, but a lot of the times it goes up into adulthood. And nowadays, adult ADHD is being looked at more closely than before, when it was just about children and teens. And so they talk about how there's a difference between ADHD combined form, or ADHD overactive form or impulsive form, or ADHD with attention deficits. I forget what the name is in English, but your distracted form. So the one that I would be having in that case would be the mostly distracted form. It's being about dreaming, being distracted easily, having a hard time finding the spark to get the car going. And that's why the car, in this case, in this driving metaphor that we keep going back to, the car doesn't start. But if you're talking about the hyperactive form, then the car is out of control. So, and you can have both problems. So it's a little bit difficult with managing to do the tasks completely. And then it talks about impulsivity. Do you often do things without thinking first? and that makes problems. It creates problems in the situations, and sometimes you need to control impulses. Like you have to stop it or like take a step back and think. Also, finding focus is a way to stop this process. So Carl, he's the guy who's writing this book. He says that he keeps, like, he doesn't think before he acts. He wants to do pottery because he wants to be creative. And there are a lot of things that he has to think about before he can like start doing this. But it's really difficult for him to get to that point. So every time he feels like something comes in his way, so like, a friend calls him, and then he's like distracted by that, and then like he's like, I need to get back to the pottery, but then he realizes that, I should like buy food at the shop, so then he goes there, and so he just keeps going through, like, just impulsively doing the things that are going around him, but not actually planning for his pottery project. Here they talk about a sort of like a step in between from thought to action. I don't have problems with this. I mean, for me, it's like I'm overthinking all the time. But I think that this can be useful for people with mostly a hyperactive form, because it's the impulsive form of ADHD. It's the thought going directly to the action. Well, the thought should be passed by reflection before it goes to the action. So it's kind of like a corridor, a kind of gateway that needs to pass through. Carl sometimes can think and reflect quite a lot, but often he doesn't really do that. Often he just acts on whatever's going on. So that was the cornerstone. Number 1 was impulsivity. Number 2 was like being driven by motor, going on high capacity. And so you feel restless, you feel like you can't let go, or you can't relax. So sometimes Carl gets into these moments, and so they lead to problems because it often goes wrong. So he forgets that to think, he goes too quickly, he takes, like, he realizes it's the wrong day, or things become more complicated. Then he also like fidgets a lot, which is something that people with ADHD do. So often he'll be like fidgeting with something and like not realize that he's fidgeting until like the thing that he's holding is like completely torn apart. So that's about that. Then the third cornerstone is that's the distraction of it. And so it's hard to concentrate, it's hard to shift focus. Also, it makes it hard to plan and organize, hard to do boring or difficult mental tasks. And it's like a muscle that isn't trained enough. It needs to be trained to be strong, to manage to deal with this pain of going through difficult things. So Carl says that his thoughts always like travel on their own. They get lost. And so she asks, the therapist asks, when was the last time you were distracted? And he said that he had to go to work on time. This one is really relatable to me. He wants to go to work on time. And the day before he'd made food, and he had not done the dishes, and he had like some sauce that was stuck on the stove, and he noticed that, and then like he started to clean the stove, but then he realized, oh shit, I need to go to work, and so he became late for work. And like he was like, oh, there was so much time. Where did it go? You know, that's kind of what happens when you are distracted by something. Then it talks about the brain's secretary. In this case, it's the brain's boss. They use different words. And it's talking about self-control and how the brain's boss and the frontal lobe of the brain cortex is the one that reflects things, analyzes, values what is like the best way to go, decides things, and does the actions. So, and it stops like these impulsive actions and like looks at how like, and it can adapt and change things if things haven't gone as you thought. So one of these, so this is about executive functions, pretty much. They don't use that word, but that's what it is. They talk about the working memory and keeping information in your head to plan and to go forward. And it's hard to hold a lot of things in your head at the same time if you have a problem with that. And Carl says that he needs to do one thing at a time because otherwise he becomes overwhelmed by too much. So, for example, they're talking about something and then he says, oh, I got distracted and I didn't hear what you said. It's too much and it's enough for now. And it's good that he can say that. It makes other people understand why it seems like he's not listening. Another thing is how to plan and problem solve to direct your life. It's to go through different alternatives, organizing, structuring information, making a plan and keeping by that plan. And so a thing that Carl does is that he diminishes his problems. He represses the thoughts of the problems. He ignores them, which in a way can make him resilient to quite a few crazy things that happen in his life. But it also means that he's repressing emotions, and also he's not actually doing actions that need to be taken to solve problems. So it's good to be accepting of the problems, but at the same time you need to also do something about them. So Carl always says, oh, that's not a problem, that's no problem. But then he doesn't actually fix the problems. So then it becomes a bunch of unfixed problems. So he has a hard time with planning, organizing, actually finishing his projects. So thing is, when he works with a therapist, things work well, but when he has to come up with the motivation himself to do these things, it's really difficult for him. But when he keeps doing this with his therapist, the therapist notices that his muscles, like his brain muscles, become stronger, and he is slowly able to remember and manage to use these techniques himself. And that's kind of like how therapy works. Certain sequences of actions can be difficult if you are always continually distracted. This is kind of relatable as well, is that Carl needs to put up different paintings on the walls, posters on his walls. And when he's putting up his poster on the wall, he realizes, I've borrowed this machine from a friend, and I need to give it back because that I keep forgetting it. I keep forgetting to give it back, and then it just everything takes a lot of mental energy, and he keeps adding more tasks to his primary problem because he hasn't fixed a lot of problems before. So it gets difficult, and then he never actually hangs the paintings up. Then they talk finally about executive functions. They talk about a book called Take the Commando Over Your ADHD by Russell A. Barkley, where they talk about talking to yourself, which leads to self-control, which is a good thing. It stops you, like it can comfort you, and it can also stop you from distracting yourself, and it can be structure in your head. The only problem is that if you use that voice to talk about other people's roles for you, then that means that you are following schemas, or whatever. You're following rigidly a set of rules that might not be helpful, and it's not flexible. So Carl, when he paints, he talks to himself. Okay, relatable. But sometimes he says to himself that he has to make this perfect, and he becomes angry at himself. And he has really high standards for himself because somewhere somebody told him that his stuff wasn't good and that it wasn't good enough. So it's good that he can talk to himself in order to like motivate himself, but at the same time he needs to be careful of what he says to himself, because it gives focus, yes, but it also it can also undermine him. So that was an interesting topic. Then he talks about how to focus your attention, to direct your attention. And it talks about how some people with ADHD hyperfocus, and they have certain things that they can fully put their energy in, and then they can be completely stuck in that and forgetting everything else. So Carl, when he reads a good book, he just can read it all night, and then he can forget to eat and drink, and he concentrates so much on that so either he's completely unfocused or he's completely focused, but he doesn't have like the balance in between. So they talk about how ADHD gives difficulties that sometimes you can't change, but it's like how your eyesight, it can get worse. Well, it won't get better, but if you put on glasses, then you can have help for these problems. But the thing is, you need to use those glasses in order to see. So that was all about problems, okay, the problems of ADHD. Then you talk about how to treat ADHD, which I won't go too much into because it's very difficult to say. It's also very individual. Most of it has to do with children and not with adults, because we don't have enough research about adults. They talk about things that are specifically Swedish, in like the sort of help that you can get from your, from the state, from your town, from your community services, from healthcare system, which will vary from place to place. But Carl actually got to talk with an occupational therapist, which I will be talking with tomorrow. That's why I have circles under my eyes, because I'm stressed out about that. I can't sleep. And it's good that he can help get some structure in his life through the occupational therapist. He also gets help from the Social Security, and he gets help from the the town that he lives in. He also gets help from the work center in order to find work that is okay for him. But it's very difficult for him to deal with all this administrative stuff. So he feels like it's impossible. He needs to get help in order to get help. And that's kind of how I feel too, kind of difficult. And also they talk about how difficult it is to get an ADHD diagnosis, and he has to wait a long time. Often the clients of this therapist have to work in jobs that they don't really like, because they don't have the mental capacity to manage to structure up their life to get out of their difficult situations. Then they talk a little bit about medicine, which it doesn't cure ADHD, but it can help some people. But the medicine doesn't lead you to having better strategies to cope with your problems, but it can help you on the way. So Carl did have medication. And at a certain point, he decided that he didn't want medication, but then he realized that he actually functioned better with it. So in the end, he decided to take it. But it's different for everybody. Then I talk about how CBT can be good for ADHD. They don't have any other psychological treatments that is known to help for ADHD at the moment. We will see in the future. Sometimes she says that she pushes Carl quite a bit, and she asks if that's okay. And Carl is actually pretty happy about that because his apartment is now fixed, which he'd been procrastinating for years. And she feels like he has actually good patience. Well, she feels like she has less patience than Carl in certain aspects. And he also says that he comes on time to work, and it feels much better, like he has better control over his sense of time. Then it talks about how difficult it is to go through therapy, which we know, okay. You can have like relapses, and you can have difficulties, but it's just a part of the process of making progress. And sometimes it is just an upward hill, an upward battle. And it's kind of like, they say that it's kind of like going to a new country. That's like, you need to leave the comfort of your own home in order to experience stuff, but you need a lot of courage. And you don't know what is waiting for you over there on the other side. And you can't just like say, oh, I don't like this, it's never going to work. We need to try to keep going forward. So Carl said that his telephone kept disappearing at the beginning of his treatment. And so then they tried working on that, and now it works much better. So with the help of his, of the whole healthcare system and everything, he managed to get it a little bit better. And finally, it's about how to deal with your close, like getting help from people in your life. And this is hard because my parents don't know that I feel bad. They don't suspect at all that I have ADHD or autism. So this is difficult. These things ADHD can affect your relationships. For example, if you come to appointments late, a lot of the time people will think that you keep flaking out, that you're not interested, when actually it's because you have a difficulty with control and impulses and with distractions. I actually got into a sort of difficult situation with my ENFJ friend when we were going to go see Florence and the Machine, because she suddenly realized that she had a birthday party to go to, and that she had to go to that before we met, so she would have to take a different train than I was, and it kind of frustrated me. So I know how it is to be on the other side of that. Like I need things to be planned out, and I can't just wing it like some people can. And it just felt like, oh, well, is she taking this seriously? Is she taking our friendship seriously? If she and is she taking this friend seriously who's had a birthday party and forgot about it until the day before? It raises some questions if you don't know, why it is. It might be just that you're distracted. But yes, these are things that we need to think about. What are the symptoms of ADHD that you think are most difficult, and how does that affect your relations with the people around you? And it's not your fault. but it can be good to know like how it affects you, because that might be things that you might want to work on. It's better if these people around you can understand, but it can be difficult for them to understand. So things that can be difficult is that they don't actually understand, they haven't seen it before maybe, and it can be painful. But it can be good for them to know a little bit more about you. So if they like see you coming late, maybe they understand better, like that you're maybe forgetting rather than thinking that you're just like not caring or lazy or whatever. But it's going to be hard to change some people's minds. They can help you, these people, by reminding you of things to do. So my ENFJ friend, I mean, I don't know if she has ADHD or whatever, but my ENFJ friend asked me, can you, next time I'll write it up in my calendar, directly when you say it, can you remind me next time that we plan something to write it up in my calendar? So I was like, okay, I'll tell you next time. So it's good if you can communicate these things. It's not always the case that it's possible, but if they're really intolerant of you. But hopefully you have some friends who care and try to understand you. So that's what I have to say on the thing. There are often certain classes that family members can take to learn about ADHD, depending on where you live. It's also difficult to feel alone in all this. And so if you can meet like patient groups or like other people with ADHD, it can be good. For me, I joined a Facebook group for doctors with ADHD. I'm not allowed to be a member because I'm not diagnosed with ADHD, but I got in contact with the admin people, and they have been helpful in like making me stress out a bit less about seeing the occupational therapist, and they answered some of my questions, so I did feel a bit less alone in this. And so then he talked, so Carl said that you can't do general rules about how people around can help. You have to go individually for each person. Carl did get help from his family and friends, for example, for managing his apartment. I got help from from my colleague who came and fixed up my sofa and my apartment. She doesn't know that I have like difficulties with forgetting things and stuff, but she does know that I live alone, that I don't have a car, and she can help me out with certain things. She knows that I like don't have many muscles and that I needed help, and she knows that I'm a little bit of a mess, so she was willing to help with that. But the therapist is a little bit less patient than Carl about how much his family members and friends don't do. And so sometimes she advocates a little bit for him, like, your friends need to help you with this, or like your family should be understanding of this. And Carl is just like, whatever, you know. It's not always easy for the people around us. But it can be good to have somebody who's on your side who can advocate for you. So if that's the psychologist, if that's an neurotherapist, if it's a friend, it can be good to have somebody on your side. It's important to also not be infantilized in all this. So for example, your parents it might be a little bit difficult for them to like, you know, because they see you as their child, and then if they are going to help you with like cleaning up, you know, you're an adult and there's certain things that you should be able to do yourself. At the same time, we all have different like levels of functioning. So it's better if you can get somebody from the outside. They do have help from like the state sometimes if things get too bad. Or you can like do some kind of compromise with some kind of friend or something like that, as long as they're like completely on board with the plan. And then it says, congratulations, you have gotten to the end of the theory, so now you can actually finally start getting into the car and learn to drive. And it says, keep working on this, and they say good luck. Okay, so with that was the end of part 2. I'm sorry for these videos being super long. I know that nobody with ADHD can actually watch these. But this book, I will say how many parts it is so that you know for the future. There aren't that many parts. So, and each part has a different color, which is helpful. There are 5 parts in this book, so we're already like almost halfway through. Okay, so have a great day, everybody. Bye.